Alright, so I just wanted to start by describing a little story about how, when I was especially going through my teens, there was a rejection of organised religion. There was a turning away in a kind of critical way from religious thought. Because I could see in the world that, there seemed to be a lot of confusion and a lot of harm being done in the name of that I didn't feel was a true expression based on my view of my idea of what God was meant to be. I developed a resistance to the word, to God, and kind of a, what do you call it? Not agnostic, but there's another term, forgive my blank mind, where, you don't believe in God, or at very least there was a rejection of what God represented in kind of the general common theology. So I noticed today that there is that this view that I held onto before and identified with in my own way, where there's a wee guy that, the people in the town that will approach you and give you leaflets about their church, and sometimes they'll shout at you that you're being judged and all this kind of stuff. And there's a particular one, anyone from here will know who it is. It's a wee guy that he sings really enthusiastically, and is giving out flyers and whatnot. And before I would have seen that as an affront, in a way. I would have labelled that as someone who has the audacity to try and impose their views and their beliefs on others, and try and suggest that you should be thinking about this in the way that I am, or believing this in the way that I am. And I would have found that somewhat appalling, not realising that that very belief that I was adopting, that viewpoint, was solidifying my feeling of separateness and distancing me from my own being within that person. That there was a lack of compassion there, a complete lack of compassion, and an inability to understand a view which is apart from mine, seeing other and judging. But I saw this wee guy today and in the town, and it was completely different, because what I saw it for was, or what I saw it as, was a fully authentic and beautiful expression of our own limitations, our own feeling of separateness manifesting in a way that is moving towards or yearning for wholeness, that an honouring from the perspective of the separate individual, an honouring of the transcendent, an honouring of what we are, transcendent of our separate limitations. Of course, I can only describe to you another interpretation and language, but in that I felt myself. In that I recognised that about myself. That this, what this person was doing was an expression of the divine in full authenticity, and I felt that in myself. In that there wasn't the separation, there wasn't the distance. I'm talking about this feeling directly. I can only put it into words in a way filtered through my own conditioning, but it was just a beautiful expression of truth. And there was nothing judging that as being something that shouldn't be happening. There was a full acceptance of that which is being expressed as myself, within myself. And like I said, it's in retrospect that you notice the relative implications of this awakening thing. And in that way you can realise how this changes the way you relate to life in ways that you can't predict. So anyway, that's just a wee story. I don't have a huge amount of time, but to see if any of you can relate to that. So I wanted to talk about impermanence, and that the suggestion is that there is something inherently existing here that's a given. And as that, what I perceive is something out there inherently existing in a continuous way as a given. But that's not the experience. So we have to assume this view. For example, I'm in a Tesco car park that I've been to many times. And the assumption is that from this inherent point of view as the one moving through this, that goes away and comes back, that when I leave this is inherently here, is a somewhat permanent thing. It solidly exists here as it is, in my absence as the perceiver. And me, the perceiver, moves away from that and it stays there. That's not the experience. It gets clear. It gets clear. Like with when I explored this initially, there was this really strong suggestion of, no, that really exists. There is a solid external world apart from me, and it's just there, that's a given. You have to let go of a lot to not seem to abide in that position. But the only thing that is imputing that as a reality is my memory. My memory exists within the context of me, the one in this, moving through it. That I was there, now I'm not there, that's still there, I've moved away. So in my experience, there is a kind of transitional phase out of this view where, I talked about this recently in the comments, where there's a solidity of me as this body moving through this external world. And it's just there, it's solid, I'm moving through it. This is why I like the word augmented, because it feels like a virtual reality, like you've got a headset on and you're in a real world and you're moving through it. But we know through technology we can have that experience and it not be fundamentally real. But it begins to change as I get in touch with what I am, as this limited subjective position expands out. When I investigate back and I don't see limits there, what happened for me is that the experience became kind of bubble-like. So there was like, you know, you ever see what's like this? You ever see like a, you know, like a dome, like a half sphere? I felt like I was looking out of this, I don't know if it's convex or concave, whatever, concave from my point of view, this dome that was like, and there was a perspective back here. And the world as it appeared wasn't so solid in that there's the ground going out, there's buildings here, there's a horizon, there's a sky, separate, separate, separate. It wasn't so layered like that. It was all one, looking out within this dome, this bubble of awareness, with it like as a screen, all appearing as one. And then the point of view of the one in this was replaced by there still being a perspective here as the, say, invisible awareness from where I'm looking, but the world started to move through me. I noticed that was obviously my experience, that I don't move through the world. In my experience, the world moves through me, my awareness, the awareness of it. So there was a feeling of expansion and unity within that disproved the solid reality of me, a separate one, moving, separate object, because the assumption is I'm an object moving through a world of objects. So I did most inquiry when I was walking. I would walk and the world moved through me. I investigated, I got so into that. And I noticed, like I talked about in the previous video with this laser beam focus, the qualities of this were relaxed, and that this half dome, this bubble of awareness, I was aware of its peripheral, and I was seeing things disappear into a nothingness, the nothingness from where I'm looking. But there was still a subtle dimensionality to it, based on this assumption of the invisible awareness, the nothing from where I'm looking, was giving it a subtle context, a background, that this awareness, everything moves through and disappears into, appears from nowhere, moves through and disappears into, and that's what I am. We're going through quickly some intense stages of insight here, by the way, so if you don't find some of this relatable, that's fine. Or you could say I was the mind, so I went from being a finite, limited mind here, within this, to being the the mind, the dreamer's mind, as which this dream is appearing. So you can see in that there was an overarching context of this is something. There's something subtly, there's awareness somehow subtly apart from this. Is awareness and then manifestation. Awareness and then aware of the world. And what I am essentially is awareness. So there was a subtle disassociation from manifestation, a subtle otherness, a subtle suggestion of there being something else. That something else is what I am. I'm subtly not that, in a way, very subtle way. In that there was a knowability implicit in that had a transcendent quality, a subtly unreal quality. So although my experience was non-dual, there was still something left. This was seen through, so to speak, because that came with some dysphoria at times that would come in waves, and the dysphoria was the idea that what I am is a something and it exists at a universal level. And that suggestion of existence came as one side of a coin with the other side, which was the suggestion of non-existence as something that could be reified and something inherent. There was something uncomfortable in that. I would describe it as kind of slightly solipsistic, in a way. A solipsistic misperception. So then there's the investigation. What my mind did was it projected this overarching background, this context out. And as I've explained before, it had an emotional flavour narrative to it. I can never quite describe this bit, but it's a very distinct thing for me. It had an overarching emotional context to it that is an attachment to this these emotional flavours of a story, like a story to it, but not in the form of conscious, solid, overt thought, at a very deep kind of visceral level. And it projected this out somehow behind the manifestation to stop me looking back here. So like I said in the beginning, the suggestion that there is something inherently here suggests there's something inherent out there. And although it wasn't perceivable, I somehow projected it behind manifestation. How tricky is that? But then I looked back towards the nothingness. I was like, if that's what I am, because there was still this nagging question, why can't I find it? So I looked back towards the nothing. And that invisible awareness, that ground of being, that background, it doesn't exist, of course. It doesn't exist. Nothing can exist. So then it was replaced with merely manifestation as the substance of presence, as the substance of awareness. And this is so simple that I can't describe it in the slightest. I can kind of the clues in this, I can kind of describe the one mind thing, and you can kind of conceptually get that. I can't describe this would be anatta or no self. It's not describable. Because that substance of mind can't reach it. It can't reach to its own below its own source. But I've used words like zero-dimensional, containing all dimensions. You hear everything and nothing. All things appearing as no thing. These kind of paradoxical statements that point to this. And that overarching background gave a constantness of the suggestion of there being something, an inherent existence. Like you hear inherent existence in the Buddhist teachings, inherent view, the infinite subject that you'll never find because it doesn't exist apart from this. An aware ofness of something else. This gave a consistency in time or context to this that provided with it a comfort to subtly avoid manifestation or the sense experience, or subtly avoid the truth of transience and permanence. When that clarifies is not there, all there is impermanence, that you can't hold on to anything. There's nothing here like that can be consistent or reliable in that way. You hear this described as a free fall. From the point of view of self, that's disturbing, that's unsettling. Because it's unknowable, it's a great mystery. As itself, it's liberation. So this appearance, aware of itself, as itself, expressing as purely that, has no inherent substance. In that it's free to move, morph and change, but at the same time not move at all, not arise and not pass. It's free to appear as everything and nothing at the same time. It's infinite freedom. It's not limited by a context, or a view, or an interpretation, or a somethingness. It's not limited by having to exist or not exist, by having to come or go in a context. You see, I can't say anything about it. Its beauty cannot be captured whatsoever, because it has no substance. It has no substance, lasting substance, which can be interpreted, even to get close to it in an artistic way. Interpretive art is not, it can't interpret this. And it's below simplicity. It's like there can be oneness with that, with the consciousness of the mind, the self-knowingness. There can be oneness. This is not oneness. But it does not exclude anything. Nothing is excluded. Anything that has ever appeared in your experience, be it apparently an illusion or not, is that too. It's all this. So that last view is so subtle. And the suggestion is, the fixation is that it's lasting, it's inherent, it's always here. Nothing's always here. That statement is true in many ways. Nothing's not always here, nothing's always here. The suggestion is that there's nothing here, but it's not. Not something, not nothing. So with that, every expression of this appearance can be treasured for its transience, its ephemeral nature. Because you can't grasp onto any of this, you can't hold on to any of this. I mean, even as a thought experiment, even you go into quantum physics or whatever, or science, to see that there is nothing permanent. There can't be anything permanent. Permanence is not a thing. It's only a relative interpretation. You need time for that. This is beyond time. Anyway, I've ranted on enough. That'll have to do. But talk to you next time.